The lawsuit between the parents of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie is allowed to move forward, but how exactly did this happen and what does it mean? Attorney Catherine Lizardo discusses. Plus, a jury has been selected in the trial of Parkland shooter Nikolas Cruz, and they will now have to make a life or death choice. Criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Josh Ritter joins to preview what the jury may ultimately decide. And Ricky Martin is hit with a major lawsuit that hints at some problematic behavior, but what exactly is this secret dirt on the pop star? Entertainment attorney Mitra Ahurian breaks it down. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
The court concludes that there was sufficient allegations that the attorney is the agent for the Laundrie. So assume that to be true. Now we have a situation where the Laundries themselves are making a statement and not standing silent. So what does that do to your argument about staying silent?
Your Honor, I still don't think it necessarily makes a difference.
Well, we have a new legal development in the ongoing case of Gabby Petito, the young woman who the FBI says was strangled to death by her fiancé, Brian Laundrie. What started with a couple traveling across the country and documenting their adventures on social media ended with the discovery of Gabby's body in Wyoming and Laundrie's body in a Florida preserve, authorities concluding that Laundrie died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. In fact, based on writings of Laundrie, it appears that he confessed to killing Petito. Now, as we've reported in a previous episode of Sidebar, the parents of Petito filed a lawsuit against the Laundries, claiming that they knew what their son had done, that he had murdered Gabby, and that they knew where her body was, all while Gabby's family and loved ones were searching for her. They claim that the Laundries acted with malice and extreme indifference. Now, remember, the current narrative is that Brian Laundrie actually returned home to his parents' house in Florida after he killed Gabby. He went on vacation with them before ultimately venturing off on his own and killing himself. Gabby's parents took particular issue with when the Laundrie's attorney, Stephen Bertolino, issued a statement, again, while Gabby was still missing, saying, quote, "On behalf of the Laundrie family, it is our hope that the search for Miss Petito is successful and that Miss Petito is reunited with her family." Now, last year, my co-host here on Sidebar, Anjanette Levy, actually interviewed Stephen Bertolino, and here's what he had to say.
Well, working backwards, I can tell you at this moment in time, we have nothing to say to the Petito family. Right now, Chris and Roberta Laundrie are just focusing on retrieving Brian's remains from the medical examiner's office, grieving their sons and dealing with that. And in the future, we'll see what happens with respect to not speaking to the Petito family in the beginning. That was on me. That was something that I told them they shouldn't be doing. And we're just going to leave it at that.
So the lawsuit right now claims intentional infliction of emotional distress based on the Laundrie's actions and those of Bertolino. However, in a hearing that we talked about on a previous episode of Sidebar, the Laundries claimed that the suit was baseless. They tried to have it thrown out. They said this shouldn't even go to a jury. They argued for a motion to dismiss. They argued that they had a constitutional right to not speak. They had no legal duty to speak. However, the judge overseeing this case, Judge Hunter Carroll of the 12th Circuit of Florida, ruled that the lawsuit can move forward. Joining me now is plaintiff's attorney Catherine Lizardo. Catherine, great to have you back here to talk about the case.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
So this is what the judge said. He said, if the facts of this case were truly about silence with no affirmative action by the Laundries, the court would have resolved this case in the Laundrie's favor on the concept of legal duty, or more precisely, the lack of legal duty for the Laundries to act. Had the Laundries truly stayed silent, the court would have granted the motion to dismiss in the Laundrie's favor, but they did not stay silent. The judge said that in his decision, if the Petito family's allegations are true in this complaint, that, quote, the Laundrie statement was particularly callous and cruel, and it is sufficiently outrageous to state claims for intentional infliction of emotional distress. So basically what it seems to me, Catherine, is he's taking particular issue with what Stephen Bertolino did. What's your thoughts?
Exactly. And this written opinion by Judge Carroll, it really changes the framework of the Petito's case now. If I'm the Petito's lawyer, I would change the theme of my case to what this opinion is. So as you mentioned, Judge Carroll actually said that there is no legal duty for the Laundries to do anything, to say anything. And I thought that was huge because that was the central issue during the motion to dismiss. Did they or did they not have a legal duty to tell the Petito if they knew what happened to Gabby's body and that she was already dead? And here the judge actually said, no, they did not have a legal duty. But the judge went further that because of the Laundrie's lawyer statement, Steve Bertolino, that now it's a whole completely different case as to whether or not that statement rises to the claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress. So the focus now is on the lawyer's statement. I have to say, as a lawyer myself, and you're a lawyer yourself too, I think all lawyers should be having this case on their radar, because now a lawyer's statement can be imputed to their client, and it generally is because we're the agent of our clients. But to what extent does your statement as a lawyer affect your client and now leads to a civil action and could potentially lead to a criminal charge against them?
So it's funny you should say that, because the judge in this case during that motion to dismiss hearing said, well, didn't we just cover the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial where the statements of an attorney are imputed to the client, meaning Johnny Depp's attorney, Adam Waldman? And even the language that the judge used in this hearing suggested he was ready to hold the Laundries responsible for what Stephen Bertolino said. Now, I do want to read you something. This is coming in as we're recording this. Anjanette Levy reached out to Stephen Bertolino to get reaction for what the judge's decision was. And this is what he wrote. Chris and Roberta Laundrie and myself are disappointed with Judge Carroll's decision to deny the motion and allow this lawsuit to proceed. Judge Carroll points out that the September 14, 2021 statement standing alone does not suggest outrage, but within the context of the other allegations in the case, the plaintiffs have met the threshold to go forward to the next phase. The Laundries will continue to use all available legal means to preserve their rights. So what does that tell you about what he thinks about this statement? And also, does that kind of give you a preview of how they might defend themselves in this civil action?
Yeah, what that tells me about his statement is that he's saying, no, my statement as their lawyer should not be imputed to my client. I just made that statement on their behalf. But the thing is, Judge Carroll's written opinion actually stated that, one, not only is he an agent of the Laundries, and also that the Laundries approved his statement because he used the words on behalf of the Laundrie. This is what they feel and this is what they want to say. But the judge went even further and say there's a reasonable inference that the lawyer knew what the Laundries knew. I think that's huge, because now the judge is suggesting that if during the discovery phase, and that's what happens next, because now the case will proceed to litigation. The discovery phase is when the parties get to ask each other questions, do the depositions, get documents from each other, and really flush out what the Laundries knew. What happens then if we find out that the Laundries knew really that Gabby Petito died? And so now there's a reasonable inference that the lawyer also knows that. So what happens to Steve Bertolino in that regard?
Just real quick before we finish this, isn't this just assuming they knew what happened? It's not definitive. It's not definitive what the Laundries knew. It's not definitive what Stephen Bertolino knew or what was told, right? It's just at this point, there's enough to go forward to a jury, because a jury could come back and say, you know what? I don't think the Laundries really knew what their son did. Is that a possibility, or am I totally off base?
No, I think you're right. And it's very important for us to mention here on your podcast that, yes, this is a technical issue that the judge ruled on. And he even wrote that in his opinion. Right now, the judge specifically said, I'm not saying what happened to Gabby Petito. My ruling is not about that. I'm not saying what the Laundries knew. My ruling is not about that. It's only that there's enough allegations within the four corners of the complaint to bring this to the next level, because we're at the beginning stage of the litigation, which is the pleading stage. And that means that the judge had to liberally construe or basically be more favorable to the Petito. That's just the laws, just so that they can have the chance to bring their claim in court and conduct the discovery they need to know exactly what happens. And you're right, if this goes to trial or when this goes to trial, the jury might say, no, everything is just reasonable inference and the Laundries didn't know anything. So it's a long battle. It'll take some years.
Catherine Lizardo, so much as always.
Thank you for having me.
A jury of 12 jurors, 7 men, 5 women, and also 10 alternates has been selected for the trial of Parkland shooter Nikolas Cruz. Now, the jury will not decide whether or not Cruz is guilty of opening fire at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School back in 2018. That's because Cruz already pleaded guilty to the murders of 14 students and 3 staff members, as well as 17 counts of attempted murder. No, rather, this jury will decide his punishment, life in prison or the death penalty for the now 23-year-old. Now, something a bit odd happened after the jury was selected. The judge spoke with Nikolas Cruz about the jury selection process, and just listen to what he said.
Mr. Cruz, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. You can put your hand down. Please state your full name for the record.
Nikolas Cruz.
Mr. Cruz, have you had the opportunity to participate in the jury selection process with your attorneys?
I don't know what's going on. I trust my attorney. I'll work with what he said.
Okay, you don't know that we're in jury selection?
I thought we were done.
Right, but the jury selection process, when the people come in and they tell us their names and where they work and so on and so forth, you were here for that, correct?
Yeah.
So you did participate in listening to what they said and the selection process, correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So apparently he's confused as to what's going on, or maybe he just wasn't paying attention. Not really clear. But remember, something to think about is that this young man has a history of mental health issues, and that will probably be a basis for one of his defense attorney's argument in the sentencing phase. Now, either way, we're going to see how everything gets straightened out when the trial does begin July 18th out in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Joining me right now is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Josh Ritter. Josh, welcome to Sidebar. Good to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this was a process that started 3 months ago. There were about 1,800 prospective jurors trying to whittle that down and now get it to 12. I want to talk to you about the makeup here, and we can try to make of what this is. So as I said, you have 7 men, 5 women. We have 2 banking executives, 2 technology workers, a probation officer, a human resources professional, a Walmart employee, a librarian, a medical claims adjuster, a legal assistant, a customs officer, a retired insurance executive. 5 of them are gun owners. You have this whole gamut across the board. What do you make of this jury?
Yeah, they cross the spectrum as far as socioeconomic backgrounds and everything else. But one thing we know about all of them is that they are all what's called death qualified, right? So they've had to go through an extensive voir dire, which includes being questioned pretty heavily on the idea of would they be willing to give the death penalty. Now, that doesn't mean that they will automatically come to that conclusion, but all of them at some point had to have said that, yes, if it comes down to me, I am willing to give this person the death penalty if I feel that it's warranted. And it's a really interesting type of voir dire. These cases are very rare. I've happened to be able to have sat in on one of these. And they go down to each juror and they go, what if you're the last one? What if all 11 have said death? And if you say death, that person's going to be put to death. Are you willing to do it? And all of them have had to been able to say yes to that. So that's one thing we know about all of them, even though they come from very different backgrounds.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because to be clear, it has to be a unanimous decision for death. If one juror, as you said, says life in prison, he's getting life in prison. And the fact that we started off with such a large pool of jurors and made it way and whittled its way down, are you surprised we even got here? I mean, this is a case, this is a shooting that everyone across the country knew about, people have feelings about, and to get a jury now to decide what the punishment should be for Nikolas Cruz, how many jurors we started with and now, what does that tell you about the process?
Well, it tells me, one, it's difficult to find people to sit on these types of trials. The other thing that is remarkable about this is that they've given an estimate of 6 months. And we're only dealing with the penalty phase. So that's not the proof of putting on the case, but they plan on calling. I've heard hundreds of witnesses to talk about the impact that this has had on their lives. It's a very different process than a regular trial when you're talking about proof and the burden of doubt and dealing with elements of a crime. This is a very emotional phase where people talk about the impact it's had on them. They talk about his life, maybe the trials and tribulations he's gone through to try to get some mitigation on his behalf. But when you're asking jurors, can they take 6 months out of their life? A lot of them were just not qualified because they can't take that much time away from their work and family and everything else to dedicate to this trial.
I read 2,000 witnesses
Wow.
at one point. I mean, I don't know if that's going to end up being, but you're having how much of this trial is actually going to be showing what he did? You know, he pled guilty, but how much of it is establishing every single aspect of this shooting from beginning to end? It's almost going to be like a mini trial within a trial.
Absolutely. I mean, because that's what the prosecution has to do. I mean, part of the reason that you're asking to give the greatest punishment that we have is because of how heinous this crime was. And I imagine they're going to walk them through every single piece of evidence as if they were trying to prove it, but with the idea of, look, this is what this person did. That is why we were asking you to bring back a verdict of the most heavy punishment we could give in this country.
I told you how many jurors we have. I told you the alternates. I told you some of the makeup. What do you think, Josh? The chances that they come back with the death penalty for Nikolas Cruz?
Yeah. Well, you know, we have to consider this case also in light of recent shootings that we've seen in this country. I think it is incredibly emotionally charged time, and it will really be interesting to see the result. And I know I'm not giving you an answer, but I guess my answer is that I don't know if I would be shocked either way. The death penalty is so severe, and this is exactly the kind of case you would expect it for. But then you're dealing with somebody who's obviously suffering from some severe mental illness, and it's hard for jurors to kind of punish someone who they don't know if they've taken that kind of a heinous mindset and responsibility for what they've done, or are they just a very, very sick person? Be very interesting to see the results.
And Josh, before I sign you off real quick, what are you expecting from Nikolas Cruz himself? I mean, we played that clip before where he didn't seem to fully understand the jury selection process.
I wouldn't be surprised if he testifies. I mean, if you're his defense team and this is your one Hail Mary, right? You put that kid on there and you help them to understand that he is sorry. He pled guilty. He doesn't want to put people through this trial. He's taking responsibility. It's just he's a very sick person and didn't realize kind of his actions on that day. I don't know if that's something the jurors are going to buy, but I think that this would be the type of case where you might expect that.
July 18th is when it's going to start, and by all accounts, the judge is not going to delay this anymore. Josh Ritter, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Over now to a wild new lawsuit against singer Ricky Martin. His ex-manager Rebecca Drucker is suing the Living La Vida Loca star for $3 million in unpaid commissions. Now, she alleges that she has some dirt on Martin and will not be silenced, claiming she protected him for years. She refers to a, quote, toxic work environment, a particularly ugly incident in Dubai involving Martin and his representative Jose Vega, a personal life in disarray, Martin's non-payment of taxes and his substance abuse, and she even refers to a potentially career-ending allegation in September 2020. So again, she's going through all of this, but not elaborating on anything more. So what does this all mean? Well, here to make sense of it is entertainment attorney Mitra Ahurian. Mitra, great to have you on to talk about this. Thanks so much.
Nice to be on. My pleasure.
Now, I know that there are disputes. I know there are disputes between managers and their clients. This one feels a little different, right? She said in the complaint, Rebecca Drucker saved Ricky Martin's career. There's just one problem. Martin completely and maliciously refused to pay Rebecca the millions of dollars in commissions that he owes her under their management agreement. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, agreements between managers and celebrities are often litigated. There's a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot of instances where somebody may have signed a management agreement early in their career, and as they take off, they realize that management agreement may not have been very fair. This is different. This is a relationship that dates back to the early 2000s. Ricky Martin and his manager were friends before she started representing him. She actually didn't start representing him until 2014. So they have a long history that goes beyond this. And it's not uncommon for managers to handle situations that could potentially be career damaging. That is part of what a manager does. Perhaps hire a publicist, help settle lawsuits and disputes. And they're really involved every step of the way, and almost like a best friend slash parent, really guide a celebrity in their career. But what's happening in this lawsuit is we're having a lot of statements indicating that there's other stuff going on that Ricky Martin was involved in, that basically I can come out now and harm your career, even though I saved you from these things coming out before. And she said specifically in the complaint that she's not going to be silenced. And I think that this is probably a really scary thing for Ricky Martin to be accused of, because she has, no lawyer would allege these types of things if there wasn't something backing it. As we just saw in the Johnny Depp case, defamation is a serious allegation. And for a celebrity to be accused of defamation, we also saw that in the 60s, it was decided that there has to be this malicious intent, which arguably she would have here if she was defaming him, because her intent would be to ruin his career because he didn't pay her these millions. So it's really interesting, because I think the seriousness of these allegations is something that Ricky Martin really needs to pay attention to.
Does it feel a little bit like blackmail? I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong here. Is she not insinuating Ricky Martin engaged in criminal behavior, not paying his taxes, career-ending allegations? It seems like this could be entering criminal territory. And the fact that she's saying, hey, listen, if you don't settle this, I'll expose everything. Something about that doesn't feel 100% right. What is your take on that?
It absolutely feels like blackmail. Absolutely feels like, an extortion attempt. But that doesn't mean that she didn't provide services for which she's entitled to money. So in lawsuits, there's often a lot of strategy where, I could really ruin your life if a lot of this comes out. So, pay me what I'm owed or make this situation right. And it could be that that's what's happening here. She, certainly may be entitled to the money, and she's using the ammunition that she has to get what she's entitled to.
Reading between the lines, though, what exactly is she alleging about Ricky Martin, if you had to guess? I mean, I don't know if you know anything about his personal life or what his his career has been like in the industry or his reputation, but what exactly is she insinuating here?
I mean, the first thought that comes to mind is we always think about sexual allegations, because that is something that, especially in today's age, can cancel someone, can end someone's career. So when we talk about career ending, I think the first thing that has to come to mind is an allegation like that, a sexual allegation that will taint his career so much to the point that he cannot work anymore. So that's what I'm thinking. I don't know if that's the case, of course, because it hasn't come out yet, but that's the first thought I would have.
And not paying your taxes is when the IRS starts calling. So, I mean, she's basically saying that as well. Yeah. Now, she said, quote, Martin has now threatened Rebecca and is attempting to force her to sign an agreement with a non-disclosure clause to silence Rebecca about the abhorrent behavior by Martin that she has both witnessed and endured. If that's true, is Ricky Martin doing anything wrong?
Well, he's trying to settle, and a lot of times settlement agreements are confidential, and they have NDAs attached to them, and they have, confidentiality clauses, and they also have non-disparagement clauses. So all of this is very common in settlement agreements. So if he is attempting to settle, which would be the smart thing to do here, perhaps he's offering a sum that is lower than what she wants, and also attempting to get this confidentiality language. And she's probably holding her ground, saying, this is what I think is the value of the services I provided.
Well, I don't think this is the last that we're going to hear of it. It is definitely a bombshell, to say the least. Mitra Hurian, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it as always.
Anytime.
Thanks for joining us here on Sidebar. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.